Russia's invasion of Ukraine is currently in its 6th month, and for the first time since the invasion began on February 24th, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that he will be speaking to his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in the coming few days. On the agenda is to facilitate the release of the U.S. women's national basketball star Brittany Griner, who has won 2 Olympic gold medals and a WNBA championship. She was arrested on February 17th at a Moscow airport when the customs officials said that they found vape cartridges containing cannabis oil in her luggage. Apart from Griner, Blinken will also be talking to Lavrov for the release of Paul Whelan, who is a U.S. citizen and a former Marine. He has been in Russian custody since December 2018 when he visited Russia for a friend's wedding. He was convicted in a Russian court of espionage charges and sentenced to 16 years in prison in 2020. The 2 Americans who have been detained by Moscow.
In the coming days, I expect to speak with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov for the first time since the war began. I plan to raise an issue that's a top priority for us: the release of Americans Paul Whelan and Brittany Griner, who've been wrongfully detained and must be allowed to come home.
Blinken further reiterated on the fact that the United States had already put forward a substantial offer to Russia on prisoners and that the government in America had repeatedly communicated on that proposal to Russia. According to reports, the Biden administration has proposed returning convicted arms merchant Victor Bout to Russia in exchange for the release of the 2 detained Americans.
We put a substantial proposal on the table weeks ago to facilitate their release. Our governments have communicated repeatedly and directly on that proposal.
Apart from this, Blinken is also expected to talk on the Ukrainian grain exports deal and the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine when he holds a telephonic conversation with Lavrov. According to the White House, U.S. President Joe Biden is also directly involved in this proposal and is willing to take extraordinary steps to bring back these 2 detained Americans.
That the president and his team are willing to take extraordinary steps to bring our people home, as we've demonstrated with Trevor Reed. And that's what we're doing right here. It's actively happening now. This has been at the top of the mind for the president and for his whole national security team. He receives regular updates about the status of our negotiations to secure Brittany and Paul's release, as well as other U.S. nationals who are wrongfully detained or held hostage in Russia, and I might add, around the world as well.
Meanwhile, there is also a sense of urgency to bring the 2 Americans back home as the White House faces growing public scrutiny from the families of the Americans who have been unlawfully detained abroad. And for more details, we are now being joined by our correspondent Susan Teherani from New York. Susan, thanks for joining us. As we've been reporting, Blinken says that he will be speaking to his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in the coming few days. The subject, of course, is basketball star Brittany Griner. Tell us more about the tone and tenor of this expected conversation.
Well, Priyanka, this will be the first telephone conversation between Antony Blinken and Sergei Lavrov since that Russian invasion on February 24th, and all eyes will be on this conversation. As you mentioned, Russia has said that no agreement has been made on this, what it calls a prisoner swap, something that the United States has tried to distance itself from. A reminder that possibly there is a Russian arms dealer with the nickname Merchant of Death in U.S. custody that the United States may possibly swap for those 2 Americans in Russia. That has gained growing criticism, saying from opponents that the United States should not be in the business of prisoner swaps and hostage negotiations. But on the other hand, the fact that the Biden administration has not been able to bring these 2 prisoners back home is also something that's been scrutinized as well. Something to watch out for is, first of all, the Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, is on a tour to Africa this week. He's making the case that Russia is not the aggressor. He's trying to get himself out and his country out of isolation from the international community. This conversation with Antony Blinken will also help Russia in some ways, despite the fact that the United States is saying that it only is focusing on the prisoners inside Russia and somewhat regarding that grain export. But for viewers and the audience inside Russia, it will be something that the media can play on.
Right, Susan, thanks so much for all those inputs and thanks for joining us at this hour on WION World is One. WION World is One is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.